In U.S. GAAP, for the last 30 years or so, there have been requirements on leases that have to distinguish between a capital lease and an operating lease. And an operating lease is expensed, and a capital lease, the asset is put on the balance sheet and depreciation is taken, their interest expense. And companies, all other things being equal, have tried to minimize the assets on their balance sheets, so they've struggled to try and call everything they can an operating lease. The people who write the financial rules, both in the US, the FASB, and in Europe, the IASB, have been very concerned about what they perceive as a misuse of leasing, and the belief was that companies should capitalize any asset that they acquire and depreciate it in accordance with fixed asset accounting rules. If the accounting rules are changed so that all assets are capitalized, this means that assets that are now treated as operating leases and do not appear on the balance sheet will appear on the balance sheet, and the fixed asset record has to maintain those records and compute the depreciation expense in accordance with both books and taxes. There's been very great pushback by companies not to change the lease accounting rules. There's been big pushback by the security analysts, maybe the SEC, and the corresponding organizations in Europe, pushback to make the accounting rules reflect the acquisition of an asset when it's leased. So there's tremendous dispute. At the time this is being videotaped, the two parties that are discussing this, the IASB in Europe and the FASB in the United States, the two groups do not agree one with the other. And since they're trying to have conformity between US GAAP and IFRS, they are not going to make a change in lease accounting until both groups, IASB and FASB, agree on what the appropriate change should be. And since they can't agree, haven't agreed so far, it's hard to predict where they're going to come out. It would be a safe prediction, however, to say that there are going to be a lot more assets that currently are treated as operating leases that are going to be capitalized and put on the books. This means that a software system must have the flexibility to accommodate any kind of rule change that is made, and that there will be significant increases in the number of assets that the asset record system, the fixed asset register, is going to have to accommodate. Now, if you have a high dollar threshold for capitalization, you might be able to argue, well, I only capitalize items over $2,500, so if you lease a $1,500 copier, you might argue, well, maybe it should be capitalized, but I just don't capitalize anything at $1,500, so I'm going to treat it as an operating expense, irrespective of what the new accounting rules are. So in effect, I think that a capitalization policy that has a relatively high dollar limit is going to make the new lease accounting rules, however they're decided, a lot easier to implement. So again, we recommend at least a $2,500, maybe a $5,000 limit for capitalizing assets in your fixed asset register. One of the problems in the leasing is that there's a distinction between the small, and I use copiers as an example, and leasing of office space or an office building. And many of the large multinational companies argue, and I think they have a very good argument, we have literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of leased assets, and it's ridiculous to make us try and keep track of hundreds of thousands of copiers through our fixed asset system. On the other hand, if you're leasing a building and have a 10-year lease on the office space, there is a argument that maybe that is the equivalent of acquiring an asset, at least the use of the space for 10 years, and that you should treat that as capital acquisition. So these are difficult issues, and in terms of fixed asset, you have to wait until the final rules are changed, and I'm pretty sure that they will be changed, and then try and minimize the impact by having a supportable minimum capitalization level, which I think will get rid of a lot of the small items in terms of bookkeeping.